Claire Harper adjusted her navy blue blazer as the last few passengers boarded the morning flight from New York to San Francisco. The routine felt mechanical by now, greeting travelers, checking seat numbers, assisting with overhead bags. After 7 years as a flight attendant, the process blurred into muscle memory. She liked it that way. Predictable. Safe. Even if it meant weeks spent away from Seattle and her 8-year-old daughter Lily. The sky had always been her escape, her way of outrunning memories that refused to fade, particularly the ones tied to Michael. The first-class cabin was unusually full for a Wednesday. Claire moved along the aisle with her usual practiced grace, her smile courteous but distant. The hum of idle conversations, the soft rustle of newspapers, the occasional clink of a glass, all familiar sounds. Until a sharp burst of laughter cut through the low murmur, loud enough to turn a few heads. It was rich, unguarded, almost joyful. Claire glanced up instinctively. And then everything inside her froze. In seat 3A, angled toward a stunning brunette with sleek dark hair and an expensive tan, sat Michael Lawson. He leaned back in his seat, a glass of champagne in hand, laughing at something the woman had said. His expression was relaxed, carefree. The sight hit Claire like a blow to the chest. Michael, her husband. The man whose memorial she had attended 5 years ago. The man declared dead after his yacht exploded off the coast of Florida. The man whose absence had left her a grieving single mother with a fractured heart and too many unanswered questions. Her hands trembled as she clutched the service tray tighter. She blinked rapidly, convinced she was hallucinating. Perhaps exhaustion had finally broken her. But no matter how many times she looked, he was still there. Same sharp jawline, the faint scar above his eyebrow, even the way his lips curved when he smiled, too familiar to be coincidence. And then she saw it. The cufflink on his left wrist gleamed beneath the cabin lights, a sleek silver piece inlaid with an emerald stone. A gift from her, given on their 3rd anniversary. A custom design she had ordered from a tiny jeweler in Seattle. Michael never parted with them. She had buried its twin in a velvet box after his supposed death. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't look away. As if sensing her stare, Michael turned his head. His eyes met hers, ice blue, sharp, unblinking. For a split second, Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Surely now he would react, show some flicker of recognition. A sign. Anything. But nothing came. His gaze remained indifferent, detached. A polite glance, the kind strangers exchanged with flight attendants before looking away. No sign of shock. No subtle twitch of guilt. As if she were no one. Claire forced herself to move, legs stiff as lead. She set the tray down on the nearest counter, her heart hammering so loudly it drowned out every other sound. She clutched the edge of the galley, fighting to stay upright. This couldn't be happening. Michael was dead. She had mourned him, buried him in her heart, spent nights explaining his absence to a child too young to understand. This couldn't be real. Yet the sharp reality of that gaze, the cold void where familiarity should have been, gnawed at her mind. Was she losing it? Had grief twisted itself into some cruel mirage? Her thoughts were a storm, spinning faster by the second when her phone, tucked discreetly in her apron pocket, buzzed. Claire fumbled it out, her hands still shaking. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "We need to talk. You saw me." Her blood turned ice cold. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Claire's vision blurred as she read the message again and again, the words pressing into her skin like a brand. Her pulse roared in her ears. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but her body refused to obey. The laughter in the cabin resumed, blending into the hum of the flight. The world continued on as if nothing had changed. But for Claire, everything had. She stared at the text until the screen dimmed, the reality sinking deeper than before. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't grief playing tricks. Somehow, impossibly, Michael Lawson was alive. And he knew she'd seen him. Seattle's late October rain tapped steadily against the cafe's windows as Claire Harper sat across from Ethan Walker, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold. The warmth of the small corner booth felt oddly out of sync with the storm unraveling inside her. Just 48 hours earlier, she'd been serving drinks on a flight, convinced she had seen a ghost, or worse, her supposedly dead husband alive and well in first class. The memory refused to leave her alone, gnawing at her sanity until the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. She hadn't known who else to turn to. Ethan had always been a familiar face in the blur of transient passengers. Over the past year, he'd flown her route frequently, business class regular, corporate lawyer, casual with his smiles, polite with his words. He remembered her name, Asked about her daughter once after seeing a photo tucked into her flight bag. It wasn't friendship exactly, more like two people orbiting the same hectic world with the briefest of connections. But today, connection was the one thing Claire craved. She had messaged him impulsively after landing. A simple, "Do you have time for coffee?" The kind of thing you ask when you need to stop yourself from unraveling completely. He had replied within minutes. Now here they were, sitting across from each other in a neighborhood cafe miles away from the sanitized corridors of airport terminals. Ethan leaned back, his suit jacket draped over the chair beside him. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie slightly loosened as if shedding his courtroom persona. His eyes, a shade too serious for casual conversation, watched her with a patience that unnerved her. Claire wasn't sure what compelled her to speak, but once she started, the words poured out. She told him about the flight, the man in first class, the moment their eyes met, the message on her phone. Not once did Ethan interrupt. He listened with a focus that felt both professional and personal, nodding occasionally but mostly letting her spill everything she'd held in since stepping off that plane. When she finally stopped, her voice hoarse, Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't suggest she was overworked or imagining things. Instead, after a brief pause, he said quietly, "Michael Lawson." Claire felt her heart jolt. She hadn't spoken the name. "You know him?" Ethan nodded slightly, his expression darkening. He glanced around the cafe as if checking for eavesdroppers before lowering his voice. "Lawson Tech. His company's been a shadow on half the corporate fraud cases I've worked in the last 3 years. Shell companies, offshore accounts, hush-hush investors. His disappearance. Let's just say not everyone bought the accident story." Claire stared at him, unsure whether to feel relief or fresh dread. "Why didn't I know any of this?" Ethan gave a faint, humorless smile. "Because men like him keep their messes hidden. And women like you, you're not supposed to see it coming." He reached across the table, a brief gesture, offering something like understanding without pity. "You're not crazy, Claire. And you don't have to go through this alone." For a fleeting moment she believed him. There was something steady in his voice, a weight that made her feel less like a woman unraveling and more like someone finally being believed. Ethan offered to help. Nothing formal, no legal maneuvers, just a quiet offer of support if she ever needed it. They left the cafe as the rain began to ease, a soft mist coating the Seattle streets. Ethan walked her to her car, his parting words a simple, "If you need me, call." Claire watched him walk away, feeling lighter for the first time since that flight. But that relief was short-lived. Her phone buzzed the moment she slid behind the wheel. She pulled it from her bag, expecting a message from Ethan or maybe Lily's babysitter. But the number glaring on the screen was the same unknown one that had haunted her since New York. The message was short. "Don't trust the lawyer." Claire's fingers tightened around the phone. A cold shiver ran through her, cutting deeper than the Seattle chill outside. The cafe conversation echoed in her mind, Ethan's solemn face, his cryptic knowledge about Michael, his carefully worded offer to help. Everything twisted inside her. Who could she believe? The husband she'd mourned for 5 years who had vanished into thin air? Or the lawyer who had shown up just when her world started falling apart, claiming to know the truth? Claire sat in the quiet of her car, watching the rain blur the city lights outside, wondering if she had just stepped from one lie into another. The knock came late, too late for a casual visit. Claire had just finished tucking Lily into bed, the soft hum of the baby monitor filling the quiet living room. The sound startled her, sharp against the soft rhythm of the rain outside. For a moment she stood frozen, her heart stuttering in her chest. Visitors didn't show up at 10 p.m., not in this neighborhood. Not at her door. She approached slowly, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet grounding her as much as it unsettled her. Through the narrow pane of glass beside the door, she saw a shadow, a tall figure, shoulders hunched, head low against the drizzle. For a second she thought it might be Ethan. Part of her hoped it was Ethan. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Ethan standing on her porch. It was Michael. He looked nothing like the man she had seen laughing in first class. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a dark hoodie pulled low over his brow, damp from the rain, his jeans rumpled, sneakers muddy. His face was leaner, shadows cut deep under his eyes, and his expression, tight, urgent, raw, held none of the easy charm he had worn on the plane. Claire's breath caught in her throat. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low, rough at the edges like a man running on empty. His eyes flicked around the quiet street behind him, a glance sharp enough to slice through the night air. Claire didn't move. Every instinct screamed to slam the door in his face, to call the police, to wake Ethan, or maybe the entire neighborhood. But something kept her rooted. Curiosity? Fear? Or that quiet part of her heart that hadn't yet caught up to the rage boiling beneath her skin? Against every better judgment, she stepped aside. Michael walked in with the wary posture of a man expecting a bullet between the shoulders. Once inside, he stayed near the door, hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes darting toward the hallway where Lily slept. Claire folded her arms, every muscle in her body coiled tight. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said first, his voice hoarse. "I didn't come to make this harder for you." Claire said nothing. Michael exhaled slowly. "I had to disappear, Claire. It was the only way to protect you. You and Lily." The words hit like a slap. Claire narrowed her eyes, her voice cutting through the heavy air. "By faking your death? By letting us think you drowned? That was your idea of protection." Michael flinched but didn't look away. "They would have come for you. For her. The people I got mixed up with, they don't threaten. They eliminate." He pulled a small, weathered suitcase from behind his back, setting it on the coffee table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He flipped it open. Bundles of cash stared up at her, stacks upon stacks of crisp bills. "For you," he said quietly. "To make sure you and Lily have a future. A clean start. Whatever you need. This is the least I can do after everything I put you through." Claire felt her stomach twist. The sight of the money turned her insides cold. "You think this makes it better? You think you can buy your way out of abandoning us?" Michael's shoulders sagged, and for the first time the facade cracked. He looked every bit the desperate man, a man who had run too far for too long and now had nowhere left to hide. "I didn't want to leave you. I didn't want to disappear. But staying meant death. For all of us." Claire shook her head, her voice rising despite herself. "You left me to explain to a child why her father never came home. You left me to mourn you. You left me alone, Michael. And now you show up with dirty money and expect me to be grateful?" Michael's eyes darkened. "It's not like that. I swear. But you need to understand, if they find me now, they'll come after anyone close to me. Including you." Claire stared at him, the weight of his words pressing against the storm of her anger. Her heart raced, torn between wanting to throw him out and wanting to believe him. He lifted his hands in surrender, voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. To fix at least part of this." Claire looked at the suitcase, at the man she once loved, the father of her child, and felt something twist deep inside her chest. Anger burned through her, sharp and hot. Fear crawled in its shadow, coiling tighter with every word he said. But beneath it all, buried in a place she didn't want to admit still existed, was something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. She didn't know if she wanted to scream, to cry, or to slam the door behind him forever. But she knew one thing for sure. Nothing about this was over. The morning after Michael's visit, Claire felt like a stranger in her own life. She moved through her routines, packing Lily's lunch, walking her to the school bus, answering polite nods from neighbors, wearing a mask so practiced it almost fooled her reflection. But underneath, her thoughts twisted in relentless spirals. Michael had reappeared like a ghost from a life she had buried, dragging with him shadows she didn't want to face. The suitcase full of cash sat untouched in her hall closet, its presence like a live wire humming through the walls of her house. She hadn't told anyone. Not yet. But she knew she couldn't keep silent forever. That evening, when Ethan texted asking if she wanted to grab dinner, Claire surprised herself by agreeing. They met at a quiet bar on the edge of downtown, a place Ethan had chosen, far removed from the polished restaurants they usually frequented. It felt deliberate. Ethan arrived first, seated in a booth near the back. He greeted her with his usual easy smile, but his eyes seemed sharper tonight, his posture tighter, as though he'd been waiting for this moment longer than he cared to admit. They talked at first about harmless things, how Lily was doing in school, how Claire's last flight had gone, weather complaints, casual deflections. But as their plates sat half-eaten and the noise around them faded, Ethan leaned in, folding his hands on the table in a way that felt anything but casual. "I know Michael Lawson," he said quietly. Claire felt her heart jolt. She met his gaze but said nothing. "I've been tracking him for over 2 years," Ethan continued, his voice low, almost too steady. "On behalf of the Department of Justice. His company's been at the center of a major financial crimes investigation. Fraud, embezzlement, offshore laundering. Michael was the key. I've been trying to get close to anyone connected to him. That's how I met you." The words landed like a blow Claire hadn't seen coming. Her skin prickled. For a moment she thought she might be sick right there at the table. "You used me," she whispered, though her voice barely carried the weight of what she felt. Ethan didn't flinch. "It started like that," he admitted, his tone shifting, rougher now, less guarded. "But it changed. The more I got to know you, the more I cared. This isn't about an investigation anymore. At least not for me." Claire stared at him, her mind a whirl of every conversation they'd shared, every text he'd sent. All the moments that had seemed genuine, now tangled in a web of motives she hadn't seen. The words from the anonymous text echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. "Don't trust the lawyer." The betrayal clawed at her chest, sharper in some ways than Michael's disappearance. Michael had vanished into a world of shadows, but Ethan had been beside her all along, smiling, listening, pretending. She stood abruptly, ignoring the way Ethan's eyes darkened with concern. She muttered something about needing air and slipped outside, the cool Seattle night slapping against her face. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Her phone buzzed as she stood on the sidewalk, cold air burning in her lungs. Another message. "Meet me tonight. No lies this time. I'll tell you everything." No name. Just like before. Claire stared at the words, gripping her phone tight as the city blurred around her. She should have blocked the number. She should have gone straight to the police. She should have done 1,000 things 1,000 different ways. But instead she read the message again, and this time something shifted inside her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the unbearable weight of living in the dark. Or maybe she simply needed to hear the truth, directly from the man who had shattered her life before anyone else could twist it again. She turned the phone over in her hand, her reflection faint in the black glass. Then she typed a single word back. "Where?" The reply came fast. A location she hadn't visited in years. A small park on the outskirts of town where Michael used to take her when they wanted to escape the city noise. Claire slid the phone into her coat pocket, her heart thudding with a rhythm too loud for the quiet night. She walked back inside, past Ethan's searching eyes, muttering a vague excuse about heading home. She ignored the flicker of suspicion in his gaze, the way his jaw tensed like he sensed something just out of reach. She left him there, left all of it there. That night, as the rain returned in soft sheets, Claire drove toward the park with hands tight on the wheel and her mind caught somewhere between fear and reckless resolve. She didn't know if she was walking into a confession or a trap. But for the first time in days, the decision felt entirely her own. The pier stretched out into the bay like a broken limb, its planks slick with ocean spray, its lamplight flickering weakly in the pre-dawn mist. Claire parked 2 blocks away, walking the rest of the distance with her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, the chill of San Francisco's waterfront settling into her bones. The city behind her was still sleeping, wrapped in a veil of fog. She felt the weight of the night pressing against her shoulders, heavier with every step that brought her closer to the figure waiting at the edge of the dock. Michael stood alone beneath a swaying lamppost, his hood pulled low, face half-shadowed. He didn't move when she approached, only shifted slightly as though bracing himself. For a heartbeat, Claire wondered if this was the last real choice she would ever make, whether this moment would define everything that came after. When she stopped a few feet away, Michael finally spoke, his voice low, hoarse, stripped of its usual confidence. He told her everything. How the financial empire he built was a house of cards, propped up by shell corporations, laundered money, and offshore accounts. How the partners he trusted had ties to organizations he couldn't escape. He described how deals turned to threats, how debts became death sentences, and how, in the end, disappearing had felt like the only way out. He spoke of the yacht, the staged explosion, the body planted before it all burned. Claire listened in silence, every detail carving deeper into her. He admitted to funneling millions into accounts she didn't know existed, hiding assets under her name without her consent. When she thought he was gone, his shadow had still been wrapped around her life, tangled into everything she thought she had left behind. And then, with a glance over his shoulder toward the dark water beyond, Michael told her what he wanted now. He wanted Claire and Lily to run with him. He swore the money he had set aside could change their lives, buy them a future in a country where no one would find them. No more questions, no more threats. Just freedom if she said yes. For a moment, the world tilted. Claire imagined a life somewhere far from Seattle, far from the pain, the lies, the betrayal. A life where Lily never had to know the truth about her father. A life where Claire didn't have to keep running from shadows. The temptation came like a whisper, wrapping around the part of her heart that still remembered the man she had once loved. But before the words could leave her mouth, another voice cut through the dawn. Calm, clear, unwavering. Ethan stepped from the shadows at the edge of the pier, flanked by 2 federal agents in plain clothes. His expression was unreadable, his eyes steady as they met hers. He told Michael, and Claire, the truth that unraveled the last knot. Michael hadn't just run from partners or law enforcement. He had framed Ethan's firm, planting evidence that ruined careers, cost millions, and forced Ethan onto the hunt that had led him to Claire. The setup had been personal, calculated. And now the reckoning had come. Claire felt the ground steady beneath her feet. For once, the choice wasn't tangled in guilt or fear. She looked at Michael, saw the flicker of panic, the crack in his hardened mask, and realized he had never really been running to protect her. He had been running for himself. When the agents moved in, Claire didn't stop them. She didn't speak. She simply stepped aside. Michael met her eyes as they cuffed his hands, something hollow settling into his gaze. Regret. Or maybe just the realization that for the first time, Claire Harper wasn't the woman standing in his shadow. Ethan stayed by her side, silent until the agents led Michael away. He turned to her, his voice soft, no trace of the polished lawyer's charm she'd once suspected. He promised her that whatever came next, there would be no more hidden motives. Only honesty. Only choice. Claire believed him, not because she wanted to but because, for once, she didn't feel like she was standing alone. Hours later, as the sun crept over the bay, Claire sat on a park bench with Lily nestled beside her, watching the morning light dance on the water. Ethan sat on the other side, quiet, his presence a steady anchor against the slow tide of change. For the first time in years, Claire wasn't running from anything, not from ghosts, not from betrayal, not from herself. The past would never vanish. But now, with Lily's small hand clasped in hers and the dawn breaking wide and bright across the sky, she finally felt free. Dear viewers, thank you for being with us. Subscribe to the channel, like us, and be sure to write in the comments what you think of this story. Don't forget to click on the bell, so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.